Good morning and happy Monday to you all, and welcome to the Running Educator Podcast, The Characteristics of an Innovative Teacher with Dr. Ken Bell. I'm your host, Mike Cummings. Today, Dr. Ken Bell, a clinical professor and co-director of the K-12 Physical Education Program, Department of Kinesiology at Boise State. The purpose of what we wanted to get together is to give educators a step-by-step process to creating an innovative curriculum in a rapidly changing world. We as educators face a critical task to help young people develop an innovative mindset. They will need to address common differences. But research shows that there's a barrier relating to class, race, and gender. Duh. But exposing students to innovative concepts, activities, and approaches, we can narrow opportunity gaps and prepare more students than ever. So, to kind of give you an idea of this podcast, I wanted to take you back to when I was teaching physical education. I came up with the wonderful unit of parkour. But before that even started, I had to fail, and boy, howdy did I fail. I tried to do educational gymnastics in a middle school setting, and it did not work at all. But that failure helped me understand where I needed to work on my management, where I needed to use lingo or interest for students, and not only that, just get a little more information on how I can modify this educational gymnastics into parkour. So I'm hoping that this helps everybody take a chance, do something different, and really challenge their teaching. But before I get too far into the podcast, I want to give some Google review shout-outs. So I want to thank the 6 individuals that did leave a Google review. Mr. John Hemmendaler, thank you so much. Jim Johnson, Jody B. Lucky, love that name. Amy Barber, Jason Lampro, and Chance Whitmore. Thank you again for supporting and helping the Running Educator podcast. I appreciate it. So, again, I'm your host, Mike Cummings, and I definitely want to just give a little more detail about this podcast, because whenever I'm referencing the power of the kids or whatever that, crazy thing we're about to doing, it's going to reference me teaching the experience of parkour. So, if I'm explaining how the kids get grouped, or where they're heading, or what the videos or whatever the little thing might be, I am referencing the parkour. Because I did use the sports ed model through here, which is a great way to teach, and I believe you can teach it not only in sports, but also in the classroom, which gives a lot of power to the kids, gives a lot of flexibility in the groups and the roles, and everybody has a purpose, and it's just a really effective way of teaching. So the other thing you'll see that I get through this podcast is the other methods that I did use. Obviously, direct instruction is one, guided discovery, tactical teaching, and behavioral pinpointing. So I'm hoping that you can take away the 3 main points of this podcast would be: surround yourself with creative people, motivate not only yourself but students, and find the things that they like to do as well as you love to do. Create the right situations for your teaching, and create a system of creativeness. Guide the process. Show the love as a teacher, because that's all kids really want to do at the end of the day. Kids want to know that they are loved and that they are needed and wanted and respected in your class, and because that might just be the only safe place that they might have to be. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy The Characteristics of the Innovative Teacher with Dr. Ken Bell. My whole purpose of this podcast is to try to teach teachers to, in the overall essence, to just get outside their comfort zone and do something with the curriculum, within the curriculum, to really hook the kids into it. And then not only that, everybody learns differently. Look at math. You have your kids with geometry over here to, algebra over here, and they're in the same class and nobody would know it. And I feel that I applied that pretty well with the parkour essence, and anything I've kind of taught really helped me just differentiate across the board. And so, where you would fit in is the mentoring and really more of the curriculum side of things that came into play, and how you taught me. And really that goes back to Dr. Ken Robinson. That was where you hooked me way back in the day, to where the creative thinking and getting kids excited and having a purpose and teaching not just physical education and motor skills, but again, the critical thinking, the safety aspects, the life, to making values and principles and teamwork and everything that goes into everyday life, is where I'm kind of going with this podcast idea. So what would you say to anybody, especially now, how to be creative, how to be innovative with their curriculum?
Well, I think some people are more, naturally more, you're a creative mind, and you naturally can come up with ideas. Once you have that seed, you get that idea, and all of a sudden bing, 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 all of a sudden you're all over the place with it. And some people don't feel that they have that, I'm not very creative. Well, that's why there are creative people around you. And so with the resources that are available to us now, there's no reason for anybody to say, well, I'm not creative. Well, maybe you're not yet. But I think with practice, it's a learned skill. It won't be as creative as a Mike Cummings possibly, but go out and find and use others' creativity. And I think once you do that and practice it, you start to develop that more of a creative mindset. You see how people take an idea and bend it or twist it a little bit, and all of a sudden something good comes from it. But I also think that part of the creative process has been this community of practice that we've developed. Whenever we would, have an idea, what would you do? You'd share it with me. You'd share it with John. You'd share it with Jake. And we'd all start bing and ideas back and forth. And I think that's where, a lot of that good creative thought, because we tend to get locked into our own way of doing things. Even myself, I get doing my stuff, and I'm a pretty creative guy, but after a while you kind of get dry a little bit. And that's where it used to be that, in education, you used to be able to go to workshops and just suck off of other people's ideas. Like we used to go do these things, and then you kind of get motivated by their energy, and then you take their ideas and you go back and do something with it. I think that we have been able to do that, and I've been able to do that with lots of educators, is start to collaborate and share ideas, because everybody's got different ideas on things. And then it slowly morphs into something that is worth trying to, try something different. And I think you have to be confident in your teaching skills. You can motivate kids. I mean, what I hear you saying, Mike, is motivation is, and I know this, motivation's the key. Mm-hmm. If we as teachers can't motivate our students, then you don't have an engine in the car. Yeah. And so, especially with the resources that are available to students nowadays at their fingertips, that not only is it exciting, it's entertaining, it's educational, and they're learning all kinds of stuff without the teacher. Yeah. And if they have a teacher who can guide that process, and I think they can learn a whole lot more. But it does take a little bit of courage to try something different. Obviously, think it through well, so that it's safe and that it's going to have a good purpose. It's not just some crazy idea and some wild thing you're trying. But I think that's there's a process there, I think.
Yeah.
And you've got to have good management skills. You have to have good interpersonal skills with students. I think inviting them your students into the process is, hey, I've not done this parkour thing. I want to try it. What do you think? Kids, help me out here. I don't have this dialed in.
Yeah.
And they're really creative. They're really smart. That's where when I started doing cooperative learning years ago, that's when I found out how smart kids really were. Is I joined them in the process and asked them to, hey, let's figure this thing out. And they did. It's always fun to go into to see a teacher kind of get locked into something. Like I filmed a little girl in a first grade class, PE class. She was modifying a dribbling task for herself. And I'm thinking, wow. Why didn't the teacher do that for her? She knew for herself. She goes, I can't do that, but I can bounce it down, catch it, take 2 steps and run and catch up to my partner who I'm supposed to be dribbling behind. And then I can bounce it and run. It's like, wow, that was a great adaptation by a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And the teacher doesn't even know to do that. And you're like, come on, man. You get paid the big bucks to know how to do that stuff.
Really, I gave the power to the kids. And it was just so fascinating because you could see your jock athletes doing their athletic, God-given talent. But yet I had this, Joe Schmo kid who couldn't do anything, but yet he was the video guru. He was the person that was taking care of all the sequencing or drawing out things. And that's where I really tried to bring in other avenues and aspects of this to keep everybody included. And so when I made the teams, I purposely made these people wouldn't be working together, but at the end of it, they were totally in cohesiveness. And most of the times I thought those teams would be a train wreck. Those were the best videos. Those are the kids that all right, hey, Johnny, you go do your backflip deal. I'm going to record it here and here and angle it here. And it was just really cool to see. And that goes back to the adaptations to where kids would always come to me and say, hey, can I do this? I was like, I don't know. How can we do this? What are the steps? What is the safety protocols that we put into place to where you can be successful and not injure yourself and whatnot? So, but the other point would be, talking about teachers who aren't really innovative or creative. I look at Brad Dupree. I mean, he was a very quiet, down to earth, shy person, if you ask me. But yet we created Quidditch. And when he was in that, a whole different person came out. He just needed to have that little push to get to that creative ways and have the guidance of doing it. And that's one thing I definitely loved about, you and Bale and Miller. You guys are my soundboard. And I'd be like, hey, here's crazy idea number 538. What do you guys think? And then we kind of break things down. And some were bust, some were good. And but I think that's the other part of the whole teaching aspect is having that great balance of people in your life that really help see from different angles, the rubrics, the assessment, the evaluation, when that's where I took the greatest pride in all those videos that those kids made. Oh no, you're using cell phones in classrooms. And, like you were saying, there's so much technology out there that I felt like when I was going through this for 5 years, I was learning how to adapt to them, not me or the kids adapting to me. And I agree with you, a lot of the stagnant ways of teachers just saying, I'm on an island. Well, you put yourself on an island, for one. For two, if you aren't challenging your ways or looking at what kids are doing, those are the things that I definitely look forward to of not only implementing something that's creative and how to teach it and challenge my teaching, but also measure, which was the biggest thing I latched on the last couple of years, is that if it's not meaningful, if it's not, fit for life, fit for purpose, going outside of people that are the athletes and then are the artists and then are, creative in writing and can do drawing and incorporating all that into the one big hodgepodge.
Education is a sad state, Mike. It doesn't change very quickly. It's stagnant. I mean, like I told you, I was teaching kids rock climbing and mountain biking let's see, it's probably over 35 years ago. And then, it takes 20 years for the rest of education to catch up. And in the meantime, when you were doing that, you were highly criticized for doing all these wacky things with kids. And it's like, well, this is what they need. and you can justify it by saying, here are the state standards, or here's the national standards. Here's standard number 1. This is skill. Look at the skill they're learning. Here's 2. Here's a cognitive information. Here's what they're learning. And so I think that assessment piece is a critical piece, because it can show that we're not just doing activity for the sake of activity, or even if it's in English class, that we're not just doing something for the sake of doing it, that there's a purpose for it, that whatever we're learning today is going to build on what we're going to learn tomorrow.
And now a word from our sponsor.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's the easiest way to make a podcast, all in one place. Download for free the Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. That is ANCHOR.FM. Enjoy.
And now, back to the show.
But education is so tight. We teach the way we were taught. We learn the way we were learned. It's ridiculous. And, even as an old guy now, I still feel like a rebel in the way I go about doing things. And some people get it.
Mid-2000s and understanding what was going on in my kids' students' lives and being attentive to that. And then not only that, like, hey, how can I spark this and bring this into my classroom? And like you said, it's funny where a lot of people, like, I remember trying, in state Idaho, the SHAPE conferences or whatever, and everybody's just like, no way. And so I remember the third year, people started to finally kind of see what I was trying to do. And then I brought my principal on board, and he was a sounding board for everything. And so, when you have the administrative on your, supporting you, which is a good thing, it's going to be successful. But it is lonely, those couple of first rounds where you're trying to get people to buy in and understand and show that it's not craziness. It's a method of madness, maybe, if anything. But again, teaching innovative curriculum, whether it is rugby, whether it's Quidditch, whether it's, parkour, just anything to get a different perspective of the curriculum that you are saying is so stagnant that is just lifeless, to resuscitate it and bring it back into life is a challenging task.
Yeah. Well, look how fast the world is changing. Education's crawling and the world is just racing along. I mean, we've got to do things differently. I think one of the things that I see in you is that when you, like you said, you put these teams together with all these different people. We all have different strengths and talents, and that the bend that we have. And so when you as an educator, you identify that in students, and then you can put the right people together. And then they learn from each other, because they much rather learn from each other than from an adult. You can look developmentally where they're at. You're just, the guide on the side. Yeah. You're not the sage on the stage. You're guiding the process, and they're going, well, what did you learn from Mr. Cummings? Oh, I don't know, but I learned a crap load.
Yeah.
In this, and that's a lot of times, even with college students, is like, I take them through these classes. And I set them free, and I just kind of guide the process. I ask the right questions, and they're learning a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, they say, well, what did Bell teach you? And I don't know if he taught me anything. Like, well, you learned a lot somewhere along the way. And I think that's the role of the teacher is to guide the process and motivate students and put them in the right situations and ask the right questions that motivate them and stimulate them to think. And then you just step back and guide the process. And they think they're teaching themselves or learning from their peers. Yeah.
That guided discovery is a tricky task, a method of teaching, because you have to be, like you said, so much with the questionnaire and challenges and how to scaffold it and work it into the way. But not only that, like, oh, things need to be changed up, let's just totally do it. Or, oh, they're reaching here, they're getting too far ahead, let's pull them back and let's start, so it really is a cool thing to kind of step aside and not be the head honcho guy, not be the main, and just, but the big thing that really helped me with that too was, the behavior pinpointing, like, oh, hey, little Susie here just did the greatest, role to get to the next level of trying to get to her backflip. I need you all to watch this. So then, like you said, the show is on those kids that aren't necessarily the greatest, and they're getting that recognition, they're getting that, the positive self-praise for themselves. But then even going back to the groups that I put together, I mean, you're going to meet people in your life that you can't work with. You're going to meet bosses that you will not enjoy, so those are just on the side of indirect teaching, life skills that they didn't even know they had, but at least I'm giving them the first taste of, hey, let's see if you can work through with this. And there were plenty of times where, we'd be self-evaluating each other at the end, like, well, what do you think about this? How do you hash this out? How do you get, so it's those life skills things that come along with it as well, that kind of grew organically from this process, which was just that I literally could have done that the whole second semester. I mean, it was that.
Well, the challenge, and here we go back to the antiquated system that we have, is that, they finally start to think, okay, let's do this Common Core thing, which is basically what we're describing here, is we're going deeper with our students, getting them to actually think and not just be receptors of information. Mm-hmm. And the challenge is, because of the system, well, how do we evaluate how much of this curriculum the student learned?
Yeah.
And in reality, if everybody's supposed to learn all the same things, then we're going to fail. Because if you're doing your job right, they're all going to be learning, but taking it and putting it on a bubble test that everybody is going to be in that same little box is not going to happen. That's not how learning occurs. That's not how people learn. Right. Like I said, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to learn different things at different paces and also in different ways. I mean, there's all these thoughts. Where did those come from? Yeah. But bringing people together and learning from each other. I mean, I think we could work on their craft and get better and better at what they do. And then we've got others who they learn direct instruction, and then they never go beyond that because it's easy, and they never want to challenge themselves, and they never reach their potential. But I'm not sure that we're recruiting the right people into education, because a lot of times those people don't fit the box. That square peg doesn't fit in that round hole. And you look at the compliant student in class who is not learning anything, and you've got this kid who's all kinds of problems. He's really creative in his thought. He blows you away with what if you get him in the right environment, you turn them loose, they'll blow you away with what they learn and what they can do. And yet you've got this compliant student who gets A's. Oh yes, sir, I'm going to do this, and it's like, okay, well, they're easy to be around. Mm-hmm. Some of the others, those kids. Yeah. I think that's probably a lot of the kids that you're working with now on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They're not compliant. They've got a lot to offer. Yeah. Unfortunately, we've got a system that's so broken. And the challenge is, what kind of system do you create? I mean, if we're going to have a public education system, that's part of what makes it so dang hard. How do you explode this whole thing and then reconstruct something that's you're going to be able to educate the masses with?
Like you said, right there on that point, just finding those diamonds in the rough and giving them a little extra squeeze to, prove their worth and their self-worth, and that they are good people and they can do good. And there is
we're complex, aren't we?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So if I can package this to where I can help somebody be creative and help somebody look differently or research a little something, or just even something that they like to do. I'm still challenging myself. I doing the teaching that I'm doing now, it's not as on a grand scale and it's a little bit more broken up, but taking problem-based learning, it's been a great way to learn. I've taken on some slam poetry. I love poetry and teaching kids how to do poetries and stuff. It's so cool. Even this podcast idea, how to take kids to get digitally, and create a podcast. I'm teaching them writing. I'm teaching them how to, edit and use, technology. I would even think if I was still in the PE classroom, the gym, I would still be doing some of that stuff in the gym, what I'm doing now, because of that's just the way I tick, that I want to find something that I can help do something different. So be that different character, be that different innovative person. So.
Well, I think what it really comes down to is the heart of the teacher, Mike, is you care about people and you want them all to be successful. You want them all to challenge themselves. You want them to experience a level of success. You want them to enjoy what you're doing, what you're trying to give them, and you want them to be motivated to learn and to grow personally and not professionally, but personally and academically. It's because you care about what's going to happen to them in the future. Yeah. Like you talked about the bad kids, they weren't bad kids, is I think maybe they didn't have the best of homes, and they didn't have they're probably super intelligent. A lot of them are really smart, intelligent kids that were never really challenged in school, and they didn't fit into that square hole. And they're going, it doesn't feel good to try and shave off the corners of me to fit into that box. That's not who I am. And a good teacher will see that and say, okay, well, you don't need to shave those off. Let's just make a different size hole.
It's really, really fascinating. And that's where, like I said, I just wanted to kind of hash things out with the innovative curriculum. And it's such a big...
We could have this conversation for days and days and days and days.
Absolutely.
And there you have it. The characteristics of an innovative teacher with Dr. Ken Bell. I hope that you took away something from this wonderful podcast, such as, surrounding yourself with creative minds. Find your people that see all angles of the idea. Try something new. Don't be so stagnant with your teaching. Motivation is the key. Find what makes you tick as a teacher and teach effectively. Have a purpose, but don't forget your management skills. Put the students in the right situation by asking them the right questions. Have your students be a part of the process. Learn from your students. Be vulnerable in your teaching. Have your students understand that you don't have all the answers and you're willing to find the necessary means to make the lessons work. Guide the learning process. Always remember behavioral pinpointing. Life skills of direct teaching and the heart of a teacher. I was fortunate enough to go to several Idaho State conferences and teach innovative curriculum, parkour. But I was also very, very lucky to go to Minneapolis to teach at a national conference. I was also very fortunate to teach at Nashville, the SHAPE conference down there. Again, the innovative curriculum, trying just to provoke teachers to do something new and go outside their comfort zone in their teaching. So, with the closure of this, I hope that this podcast challenges you as the teacher to seek out your vulnerabilities in your teachings. Fail miserably. Seriously, put yourself out there. Mess up, learn from it, reflect on that mistakes or where you went wrong and just critique it. This parkour idea took 7 years to really perfect. But it also opened up other doors for me to teach Quidditch, to teach rugby, to try different styles of teaching methods. So really create something new for you and your student. Make a change in your teaching style to help the whole student grow into a better person. Again, it starts with you. As I stated, kids don't really care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So if you want to get more information about Dr. Bell, please go to the show notes. You can also see my whole complete unit for teaching parkour and Quidditch, among other different types of lessons on Teacher Pay Teachers. And if you're interested in any of Dr. Bell's other publications, he has done several books: Teaching Children and Adolescents Physical Education with Greg Graham. He's done Got Skills, a Physical Educator's Guide to Teaching Children Skills of Lifetimes of Movement with John Bale. He's done The Effects of Game Size and Physical Activity Levels and Ball Touches in Elementary School and Children and Physical Education. That was with Tyler Johnson and Jane Shimon. Another one with Tyler Johnson and Jane Shimon is Fitness and Enjoyment Outcomes of Physical Education, Fitness, Conditioning Curriculum. And then the last one he did with Dr. Johnson, Using Modified Programming Practice Sheets to promote skill learning and assessment in a physical education. The Teaching Children and Adolescents Physical Education Volume 4, I'm in that one. You can see me in the itinerary part of the book, and I'm teaching basically different types of ways of taking roll, and it was just a really fun book to be a part of. But anyways, that's a whole other podcast. As always, the Running Educator advocacy and support. You can always help us with the Hope Rising Kids Ministry GoFundMe page. Again, if you're somebody who's struggling with any kind of suicidal ideations, please contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. I want to thank my sponsor, the Idaho Running Company. There's a coupon there for 10% off. Please check that out. Also, you can just support me by leaving a review on any of the Apple podcasts, Spotify podcast, and of course at my website, therunningeducator.com, you can leave me a Google review. How you can support the podcast is by telling your friends and sharing online, subscribe and review. Please make sure, again, you review, share comments, and subscribe to the show on various platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Breaker. These reviews help me tremendously by helping me get my next guest. So, this is Mike Cummings signing off and saying, keep running and keep learning.